and data manager for the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's Anti-Semitism Research Center. It's great to be here with you all today. We've gathered to talk about particularly the findings produced by our research center in our 2023 data report, as well as our 2023 IHRA Adoption and Implementation Report. In our data report, particularly post October 7th, we found not only a concerning rise in far-left anti-Semitism, but we actually detected a parity between far-right anti-Semitism and far-left anti-Semitism, which happens to be the first time this has occurred since we've began monitoring incidents within the Anti-Semitism Research Center. We were particularly distraught by the severe rise of anti-Semitism across US universities, colleges, campuses, as well as European campuses, and equally surprised by the lack of adoptions that we saw in these academic institutions throughout the 2023 year. To have this conversation and to understand the impact that this subsequent rise of anti-Semitism is going to have not only on Jewish communities, but on societies all over the world, as well as potential action items that can be considered following the adoption and implementation of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, we're gathering today with top experts in the field who will be providing insight not only within their respective regions, but also drawing insight from their extensive professional experience in combating and studying anti-Semitism. So with us today, we have Professor Dina Porat, founding head of the Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry at Tel Aviv University, Natan Sharansky, chair of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's Advisory Board, Professor Erwin Kotler, former Canadian Special Envoy for Preserving Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism, Katharina von Schnurbein, European Union Coordinator for Combating Anti-Semitism and Fostering Jewish Life, and Tamer Ben Ezer, a victim of anti-Semitism at American University in Washington, D.C. So, without further ado, I'd like to begin with Professor Dina Porat. Dina, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm also glad to be part of this gathering dedicated to the working definition of anti-Semitism and to the ways this definition can help be a tool in order to struggle against anti-Semitism nowadays. This definition, which has been first published publicly in 2005, and then more so in 2016, when the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, adopted it, has proved itself along these years really as a tool, as a means to express, be a statement, to express a position, a kind of a moral position, and by which, by the adoption of the definition, one actually says that he, she, the institute, the center, the government are ready to fight not only anti-Semitism, but other evils as well. Therefore, no wonder that this tool has already been adopted by more than 1,200 bodies, entities. The report that has been mentioned by Yoni Michani and was published, done and published by CAM, the Combat Antisemitism Movement, in cooperation with Tel Aviv University, with the Center for the Study of European Jewry, now headed by Professor Uriah Shavit, recently published. It pinpointed 1,216 entities worldwide that have so far adopted the definition. One should say that in 2023, there were 100 adoptions, which is a number higher than the year before, and the year before was higher than the preceding year, which means that this movement, this development in adoption is increasing. It is increasing. More than a third of the adoptions took place in the United States, but more important to say is that a bit more than half were adopted not by governments, but by local councils, universities, sport clubs, religious institutes, all kinds, which in this variety shows that it really reached wide circles, wide audiences, and it is being put to use. Let me add a major point, one more major point, and then try to conclude. Antisemitism, I don't have to tell you, has been on the rise since October 7, more violent. The calls to kill Jews go out freely, as if this is already a natural call. Calls for the destructions of Israel are heard daily, as if anti-Semitism was waiting under the surface, waiting for this moment for a pretext to go out, for an event to go out. Not that the event really created this anti-Semitism, but that it was waiting for it. There are ground reasons for that. They are all, by the way, carefully detailed in the report that we have just jointly published. Let me mention ignorance. Ignorance is rampant. Many of those calling, shouting, demonstrating, carrying plaques, etc., don't even know where Gaza is on the map. When they say from the river to the sea, they have no idea which river and which sea and who lives in the middle. And not only that, there is rampant ignorance regarding the Middle East, the conflicts in the Middle East, the history of this conflict, but also regarding the state of Israel and the Jewish people in general. I think, I believe, and I've seen it in action, that dealing with the definition, deliberations before adopting it, bring to the table debates, information, discussions that can help in fighting this rampant ignorance and push it aside a bit. The definition, as much as it succeeds and is more adopted, is also being attacked by attempts to replace it by others. But these attempts, who are of an academic nature mainly, have not been followed or adopted or succeeded so far, because the definition we are dealing with, the working definition, has a practical nature. It's simple, it's short, it's clear, concrete, not legally binding. It's a tool, and it can give a basis for wide cooperation. And let me end with what we started with. It gives a way to express an opinion, express a position, a moral position, to say where you are and what are you fighting for. Thank you very much. And I'd like very much to hear my colleagues, my dear colleagues who are present here, and hear what they say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you for sharing those incredibly insightful thoughts. Next, we will hear on key findings on the state of anti-Semitism in 2023 from Natan Sharansky, chair of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement's Advisory Board. Natan, it's great to have you here with us today.
Dear friends, I welcome all the participants of our conference addressing anti-Semitism together. My name is Natan Sharansky, and I'm the chairman of the advisory board of Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, CAM. One of our challenges, one of our tasks is to defend the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, to insist why this definition should be accepted as the central one, as the real one, as dealing with the real problem. The difference between IHRA definition of antisemitism and all the others, this definition insists that there is direct connection between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Of course, not all the criticism of Zionism and of Israel as a Jewish state is anti-Semitic. To the contrary, there should be many ways to criticize Israel as any other democratic state, and to criticize Zionism's ideology as any other ideology. But the moment this criticism turns into demonization of Israel as a state, delegitimization of Israel as a state, double standard which is applied to Israel, not applied to any other country, that's exactly what anti-Semites were doing for thousands of years, demonizing Jews, delegitimizing Jews, and applying standard which is not applied to any other people but to Jews. And that's antisemitism. And today, unfortunately, we got a very tragic example or proof of this connection. The most sadistic, the most awful bloodshed, pogrom against Jewish people in Israel was welcomed by so many so-called liberals at the beginning of liberation movement. That it's not attack on Jews, it's attack on colonialists, on Zionist settlers. And that's why it should be at least understood, if not justified. And so this awful attack on Israel brings to the dramatic increase of anti-Semitism all over the world. And so we discover almost immediately that Israel is treated by double standard, with which Jews were treated for thousands of years, that Israel is demonized, the way how Jews were demonized all over the world, and that the very existence of Israel is put under the question, exactly as the legitimacy of Jewish communities in Europe, in ancient world, in Christian world, were under the questions. So that's why it is so important to accept the international definition, IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which connects the most awful forms of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And what IHRA is doing about it, not only what CAM is doing about it. Not only we go from one institution to the other, from one state to the other, explaining and fighting for it. We are organizing special conferences of the mayors of the cities, of the mayors of the cities in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe, in Northern America and in Southern America, practically in many other places in the world. And these conferences, the mayors of the cities sometimes face for the first time in their activity as the mayors this challenge, this problem of today's society, growing anti-Semitism and growing hatred towards Israel, and how one strengthens the other. And we are so glad that we found great partners among the leading mayors of the world. We found great partners in many institutions, in many parties, in many universities, and we do hope that the conference today will help us to broaden the circle of our friends fighting together anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for those remarks. And now we will hear from Erwin Kotler, CAM Advisory Board member and former Canadian Special Envoy for preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. Erwin, thank you for joining us today. Sorry,
I just want to mention that today is the anniversary of Anatoly Sharansky's, Natan Sharansky's release from Soviet prison, and so it's a day of remembrance and celebration for this heroic human rights figure that is making an enduring contribution not only to the welfare of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, but to our common humanity. And it is particularly important, that kind of contribution, because we meet in the shadow of the pain of October 7th, not only the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust, as has been mentioned, and where the hostages remain a looking glass into those horrors, but where the mass atrocities have resulted in the worst explosion in anti-Semitism since the Holocaust. And here the painful Orwellian paradox. Hamas, the perpetrator of these mass atrocities, is not only a terrorist organization, but it is an anti-Semitic genocidal terrorist organization, not because I say so, but because they say so in their genocidal anti-Semitic founding charter of 1988. And so what we have been witnessing is a standing incitement to hate and genocide by an anti-Semitic organization. One would have thought, therefore, that these mass atrocities committed by Hamas would have resulted in a mitigation of anti-Semitism, but it has resulted in an explosion of anti-Semitism. And so the question, therefore, is how do we address it, and how does the IHRA definition come into it? Because we have a situation at this point where Hamas is not only a terrorist organization, but has never been held to account for its anti-Semitic incitement. Similarly, Iran has never been held to account for its genocidal anti-Semitic incitement. In fact, the 21st century began on January 3rd with the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, saying there can be no resolution to the Arab-Israeli conflict without the annihilation of the Jewish state. Didn't even use the euphemism of the Zionist regime. And here too, no accountability, no state-to-state action before the International Court of Justice, as was done in the Orwellian inversion of taking Israel before the International Court of Justice. And where anti-Semitism, in one of the most disturbing phenomenon, is actually laundered under the under universal public values, under the protective cover of the UN, under the authority of international law, under the culture of human rights, under the very struggle against racism itself. And so all of this makes the enhancement and of the adoption and the implementation of the IHRA working definition all the more necessary and urgent, because the IHRA working definition is not only the most authoritative, comprehensive, international consensus definition we have, but what is often ignored, it's the most democratically adopted definition that we have, adopted over a 15-year period by governments, by parliaments, by civil societies, all of which Dina has mentioned in her important capsule of the inventory of adoptions and the like. And what I found in terms of my own 3 years of being the special envoy, and with this I move to a close, is while we are witnessing an explosion now in anti-Semitism, unprecedented, as I said, since October 7th, the two principal findings I had as special envoy, and which make the adoption and implementation of the IHRA definition so urgent, as they were even in fact before this explosion, was number one, the conventional paradigm of combating anti-Semitism from the far right, from the far left, from radical Islam, still remains true. But the principal finding that I found was that anti-Semitism is becoming increasingly mainstreamed, normalized, legitimated in the political culture, the popular culture, the campus culture, the entertainment culture, the sports culture, and the like, with an absence of outrage. And indeed, we've seen with the explosion of anti-Semitism, astonishingly denials that it is even occurring, silence in the face of it, further incentivization of it, etc. All of which makes, as I say, the adoption of the IHRA working definition all the more urgent and compelling. But not only adoption, implementation. It's not enough to just adopt the definition. I found that while Canada had adopted the definition, what was lacking was the implementation, if I can use the term, the mainstreaming of the implementation in the government, in civil society, in universities, and the like. And it's important and relevant here to note that the UK, which will become the chair now of the IHRA working definition, has been a model for the adoption of the working definition within the university culture, within the sports culture, and the like. That's what we need to do. We need to mainstream the implementation of the IHRA working definition, just as anti-Semitism has itself become mainstream. That is the best antidote for it, which leads to my second principal finding. And with this, I conclude that anti-Semitism, as we know, is not only a threat to Jews, it's a threat to democracy. It's an assault on our common humanity. It is, as has often been said, the canary in the mine shaft of global evil. And while it begins with Jews, it doesn't end with Jews. And the IHRA working definition, if we want to combat this scourge of anti-Semitism, you have to be able to recognize it, you have to be able to identify it, you have to be able to define it. That's what IHRA does. And in doing so, IHRA, the working definition, is protecting our democracy, is in the service of our common humanity, in defense of our human rights, and something, as I say, that is a matter now of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erwin, for those incredibly insightful remarks and comments. We now turn to Katharina von Schnurbein, European Commission Coordinator on Combating Anti-Semitism and Fostering Jewish Life. Katharina, thank you for joining us. Stage is all yours.
Hello, Yoni. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here together with all the esteemed colleagues who I value so highly, including in the year-long promotion of the IHRA definition. We have been very clear, I think, for many years that you can only fight it if you see it. And in order to see it, you must know how anti-Semitism plays out today. And the IHRA definition, with its examples, offers this opportunity to have the different contemporary forms of anti-Semitism identified with the necessary nuance. For example, it is very clear because often the critics of the IHRA definition say it limits free speech. Actually, it doesn't. It allows free speech because it's a refined instrument, not perfect, but a very refined. For example, when it comes to the criticism of Israel, it clearly says criticism of Israel like that leveled against any other country cannot be seen as anti-Semitic. And Israel itself has adopted the definition. So very clearly you can criticize the government of Israel and it is not anti-Semitic. It also clearly says that context matters. And it says that whether an anti-Semitic incident is illegal is defined by law. So it in no way limits free speech. Rather, it gives those who for many years and decades had the feeling that when it in particular comes to Israel-related anti-Semitism, it was difficult to explain to others why they saw this as anti-Semitism. And this definition gives the different, it gives a basis to show why Israel-related anti-Semitism is perceived as anti-Semitic. We did a study by the Fundamental Rights Agency, which looked at the perception among European Jews when it comes to the different forms of anti-Semitism that they perceive. And while Holocaust-related anti-Semitism was the most pernicious one, the one that Jews encountered most online and offline is Israel-related anti-Semitism. So it's very important that we do not exclude this form of anti-Semitism from the definition, which some other documents have tried to do. I believe what we have seen is that member states here in the European Union, following also the EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism that was adopted in 2021, but already before, the Commission used the definition since 2017 as the basis for our work in the fight against anti-Semitism. The European Parliament adopted it in 2017 as well, and then all EU member states referred to the IHRA definition as the basis for the fight against anti-Semitism in a Council conclusion in 2018. And that was taken by unanimity. So we have seen a lot of support from state authorities, and that has translated in some countries into trainings for law enforcement, training for educators. And I believe that is key for the IHRA definition to have an impact, because adoption alone does not change the game. You have to make sure that it can also be applied. And for that reason, we published in 2019, together with the IHRA, a handbook on the practical use of the IHRA definition, which, based on real incidents that happened, shows how the IHRA definition can be used. And that handbook is used by those who train others about the definition, and can be used by any NGO, by any authority, by any organization really that is willing to have a protocol as to how to prevent anti-Semitism and what to do when an anti-Semitic incident occurs in their own organization. And I believe personally that each organization, whether state organization or NGO, should have such a protocol or such a guidance as to what happens, because what we have seen recently is that in the cultural sector, but also in university, now recently with the opening of the Holocaust Museum in Amsterdam, that there was a total lack of compass. Holocaust survivors having to walk through a mob of people yelling from the river to the sea, clearly who had completely not understood what this was about and mixed the very different realities. And then the question is, how do the authorities react? And if you do not know exactly how to react and you do not have clear protocols, it's difficult to react quickly. And what needs to happen in such circumstances is the quick reaction. And we saw a positive event in that sense on the 12th of March at Sciences Po, where there was a pro-Palestinian event, and a Jewish student wanted to enter the room, and they didn't allow this Zionist, which has become the worst name you can call somebody, into the room. And there was a very quick reaction from the leadership of the university, from politicians. We also reacted quickly, so that within one day this issue was clarified as an anti-Semitic incident that was unacceptable. So I fully agree with Dina Porat, who said that many universities, sports clubs, NGOs, civil society organizations have adopted this. Again, I think here the challenge is now, as we see state reactions are better, that also civil society reacts in a quicker and a more decisive way when anti-Semitic incidents happen. Because I think Jews are aware that this 2,000-year-old hatred is not going to go away quickly. But what needs to happen is empathy and a clear stance. And this is what the IHRA definition also can offer in its applications. Now, with regards to the horrific events on the 7th of October, I believe that even in, especially even with regards to that event and the aftermath that happened in Europe, the IHRA definition has been very helpful. We saw on the day itself, on the 7th of October, dances on European streets celebrating, not being in protest of what Israel then did afterwards, but really on that day celebrating what Hamas did, killing Jews. Yeah. And this situation, I think, is something that we capture when we see that the idea of self-determination for the Jews, seeing Israel as a racist endeavor, also the racist aspects of wanting to kill as many Jews as possible, and if possible, or this genocidal intent. All of this is also captured by the IHRA definition. So I think even in the current context, and we can use it, although some of the incidents are very clear-cut hate crime defined by law. What the IHRA definition does is it defines the bias, and then the law says whether it's a hate crime or not. And in conclusion, I would like to say the IHRA definition, I believe, has been criticized because it works. We see that in the current context, but also beforehand, those who understand the IHRA definition understand also context with regards to other minorities. So it's not only with regards to the Jewish community, but the IHRA definition can have a much wider understanding of discrimination, of bias, also towards other groups. And fighting anti-Semitism is not for the Jews, it's for all of us. It's to safeguard our democracies. And in that context, I can only encourage to read it, to know it, and to pass it on. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katharina, for joining us. And I'd like to reiterate to our audiences a remarkable pattern that we've seen with our guest speaker so far, that addressing anti-Semitism is more than protecting Jewish communities around the world, but making sure that societies aren't eroded by illiberal values. So I'd like to thank you, Katharina, for joining us today. And last but not least, we move to hear from Tomer Ben-Ezer, who's a student in the American University in Washington, D.C., and has been a victim of the vile anti-Semitism that we've seen across American campuses, both before and particularly post the horrific incidents of October the 7th. Tomer, thank you for joining us.
My name is Tomer Ben-Ezer. I am a student in American University. I'm an Israeli citizen and an American citizen. I moved to the United States in 2018 when I was 18 years old, finished high school in Arizona, and then after COVID decided to go and pursue my bachelor's in American University in computer science and in music performance, piano playing. October 7th hit me close to heart. I've attended 6 funerals overseas over Zooms, close family members and friends. And life on campus was not easy at all, to say the least. I've been spat on more times than I can count on my hand. I've been called fascist pig, murderer, all sorts of stuff that I wouldn't call my worst enemy. Besides being very hostile on campus, it was very difficult to stay on track with academics. That's due to the fact that I couldn't take any academic leave because I wouldn't be able to finish in 4 years. And with administration not being able to help me academically, I had to continue on studying while there's a war in the country that I'm from. All that said, I had a piano performance recital last December where I put up posters of my recital. And a few days after I put the posters up, I found one of them with the swastika on it, an X on my face, and sentence saying, "Death to the Zionists, Hitler was right." I immediately contacted the American University Police, and then later the FBI, and of course I've filed a Title IX to the university. It was on a Friday. I was hoping to get encouragement and support from the university as soon as possible. Sadly, it took the university 6 days to even approach me, saying, "How am I doing?" At that point, I was about to give up on school and just go home, because I didn't feel like I belong here. It's not my place if I cannot feel safe to go to my own recital. Due to the lack of response from the university, me and other students have filed a lawsuit against the university for neglecting anti-Semitism on campus. That's not only me that has been facing anti-Semitic incidents on campus and having the administration doing absolutely nothing to help the Jewish and Israeli students on campus. I do not feel like the university is trying to help, and I think they try to avoid the whole situation as a whole. I did not let this put me down. I, at the end, had the recital on the exact date with police outside of my recital hall and 2 FBI agents in the audience to take some notes. And I had a fantastic recital. I used this hate as fuel to be the best that I can be. And currently, I'm an active member in SSI, Students for Israel movement on campus. And we are having events for Israel, raising awareness, raising funds, and having a community. And trying our best to make every Jewish student or Israeli student feel at home on campus. I'm not going to give up. They won't put us down. And I'll do everything in our powers to make the next generation not face what we are facing right now.
Thank you, Tomer, for a brief insight as to what is happening on American campuses, and we salute your efforts in combating these as well. I'd like to thank again all our panelists today for joining us and providing incredibly insightful remarks on the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, its absolute necessity in terms of adoption, but as well as its implementation across different societal sectors, so that we can not only continue to protect Jewish communities, but so that we can continue to uphold basic liberal values that we also very much treasure. Thank you all very much.